It was supposed to be just another run at the end of a typical Tuesday. I was tired, ready to turn off the app, when that request appeared in an isolated spot near the end of town. I considered refusing, but I accepted. A few minutes later, he emerged from the shadows of an alley, walking quickly, looking around. When he approached the car, my stomach turned. The guy was covered in blood. His shirt was soaked, his hands were shaking, his gaze fixed, and yet, he opened the door and got in as if it were normal. I froze. Everything in me screamed to get out of there, to hit the gas, to disappear. But before I could react, he spoke softly, with frightening calm. "It's not what it looks like. Please just drive." At that moment, something inside me froze. I didn't know if I was looking at a victim or a criminal. But for some reason I still don't understand, I put the car in gear and started driving. If you enjoy real or almost real stories that start out ordinary and end unexpectedly, leave a like and subscribe to Backseat Secrets. There's plenty more weird stuff coming. My name is Daniel, I'm 38 years old, and I work as a ride-hailing driver in San Diego, California. I've been doing it full-time for almost 4 years, mostly at night. Not because I like the wee hours of the morning, but because that's when everything slows down. Less traffic, more silence, fewer people trying to make small talk. Just me, the car, and the radio playing low. Sometimes jazz, sometimes blues, when I want to let my mind wander. That night, it was almost midnight when I accepted the ride. I was seriously considering calling it a day. I'd done about 6 rides, nothing out of the ordinary. Drunk passengers returning from bars, couples arguing quietly in the back seat, people in a hurry going nowhere. The kind of thing you learn to ignore after a while. My thermos still had lukewarm coffee, and the air conditioning kept the car pleasantly cool, even in the sweltering California summer heat. But then came the notification. The passenger's name was strange. It only appeared as J. The pickup location was an intersection near a semi-industrial area, where there's hardly any traffic at night. The kind of place I'd normally avoid. But the fare caught my eye. Surge pricing, well above average. You know when your brain says, no way, but your bank account says, just this last one? That was exactly it. I accepted. I turned the steering wheel and headed down the city's wide, dark avenues. On the radio, an instrumental version of Miles Davis's Blue in Green played. Ironic now that I think about it. That song always gave me a feeling of quiet melancholy. Almost like a warning. I arrived at the meeting point in 10 minutes. No cars on the street. No sound other than my own engine. The lights in the nearby factory were off, and the only illumination came from a slightly crooked streetlight that blinked and blinked, as if it too was tired. Time seemed slower there. The kind of place that makes you double-check that the doors are actually locked. I parked the car at the exact spot on the map and waited. 1 minute. I was about to cancel when I saw a shadow move at the corner of the street. It was coming from a side alley near an overgrown fence. I couldn't see its face clearly from where I was, but I could make out its quick, suspicious, almost paranoid gait. It approached, looking sideways as if it feared being followed. And as it got closer, my headlights illuminated what I couldn't believe. The man was covered in blood. Literally. His white shirt was dyed red, his jeans stained in irregular patterns, as if someone had thrown a bucket of paint over him. Only it definitely wasn't paint. He was carrying something in his left hand, maybe a coat or a bag, hard to tell. His right hand was shaking slightly, and his face, pale, almost gray. But what scared me most wasn't the blood. It was the look in his eyes. A direct, penetrating look, as if he already knew what I was thinking. As if he was used to that kind of reaction. When he opened the door and climbed into the back seat without a word, I froze. Literally. My hands froze on the steering wheel. My mind raced with possibilities. Do I call the police? Do I grab my phone and start filming? Do I run away and leave everything behind? But before I could make any decisions, he spoke. And his voice was too calm for the scene I saw in the rearview mirror. It's not what it looks like. Please just drive. That sentence lingered in the air, like thick smoke we try to ignore but can't. It's not what it seems. I wanted to believe it. But the smell of blood was real. The cloth he held against his body felt heavy, wet, and him? Quiet. Breathing deeply, as if he'd just escaped something or someone. My first reaction was instinct. I wanted to get out of there. My hand reached for the gear shift, as if a push would be enough to get the car moving, only in the opposite direction. But I didn't. Something held me back. I don't know if it was fear of reacting badly and causing something, or the absurd feeling that if I kept calm, I would get out in one piece. The silence in the car was violent. There was no music, no street noise. Just the ticking of the hazard lights I hadn't even remembered activating. I found myself staring at the rearview mirror, trying to analyze his every move, his eyes fixed on the road, as if expecting me to obey. The kind of look of someone accustomed to giving orders and being obeyed. My mouth was dry. The air conditioning blew directly in my face, but my back was sweating, as if under an interrogation light. I considered everything: police, hospital, calling for help, pretending the car broke down. But each plan ended with the same thought: what if he has a gun? That's when he repeated, more quietly, almost in a whisper, "Just take me. No one needs to know anything." And at that moment, without understanding why, my hand returned to the steering wheel. And I began to drive. As the car began to move, I felt as if every meter I traveled was taking me deeper into something I wouldn't be able to escape. He didn't say anything. He just stared out the window, as if expecting someone to emerge from the darkness at any moment. My heart was pounding so loudly I barely heard the sound of the engine. "You have to trust me. Just for a few minutes," he said, still looking outside. Trust? That word struck me as an insult. It was as if a man covered in blood, without explanation, in an isolated part of the city, had the right to ask me for trust. My mind screamed at me to stop, to do something, but my body didn't react. It was as if my instincts had taken over. "I didn't do anything to anyone," he said, now turning to face me. "It was a difficult situation. I just need to get out of here. 5 minutes. Then you'll never see me again." The way he spoke wasn't aggressive, but there was something more frightening: calm. That calm of someone who knows exactly what they're doing, as if everything was under control except me. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror every few seconds. I was searching for any sign of a lie, any unusual gesture. He was shaking a little, but not from panic. More like pent-up adrenaline. His fingernails were dirty. His clothes were stained with layers of blood. That wasn't a splash. It was direct contact. "Look," he continued, "you can drop me off on a busy street. Drop me off in the middle of town. You don't even have to finish the race. I don't even exist here. But please, just drive now. I don't have much time." That last sentence really got me. I don't have much time. Was it a threat? A warning? A cry for help? Something about that speech made me look at him again, but for longer. And for the first time I saw. It wasn't just blood. It was fear. Genuine fear. And not of me. He was running from something or someone, and I was suddenly the link between him and a destiny I didn't understand. I drove for a few blocks, my palms sweating on the steering wheel, each stoplight seeming to last twice as long. My mind was spinning in circles. What if he'd hurt someone? What if I was transporting a murderer? At the same time, there was something there that prevented me from acting. All that blood, it didn't match his expression. He didn't look euphoric, nor distraught, nor aggressive. He looked tired, like someone who'd been running for too long. I considered pulling over to the nearest gas station and pretending I needed gas. But what if he pulled something out? A pocket knife, a gun? I considered pulling out my phone and quickly texting emergency services, but he could see it in the reflection. The risk was real. I was trapped in a moving car with a man covered in blood, and I had no real idea what to do. That's when I made a simple decision, the only one that, at the time, seemed safe: record everything. I discreetly adjusted the app's camera, which was already recording the ride. I tilted the rearview mirror a little more to get him in the frame. I turned on the microphone I usually use when recording funny stories from the night to share with friends. And I left the rest to technology. If something happened, at least it would be recorded. He noticed I'd moved something, but he didn't comment. He just took a deep breath and asked, "Are we heading towards the center?" I nodded, saying nothing. He nodded. We crossed a busy avenue, but he didn't ask to stop. He just sat back in his seat and glanced at his watch, as if counting down the minutes. That made me even more nervous. Why the rush? Did he have to leave early? There, with the city passing in slow motion past the windows, I understood I had made my choice. I was taking this man wherever he wanted, even without knowing who he was, what he had done, or if I would regret it in the next minute. But the truth is, part of me wanted to know where this would lead. As if, deep down, I knew this race would change me forever. After the question about downtown, he fell silent. But it wasn't just any silence. It was the kind of silence that weighs heavily on the chest, as if even the air in the car had decided to stop to listen to what was coming next. I tried to concentrate on driving, but with every light, every turn, my brain re-evaluated everything. The blood was real. The tension, palpable. The metallic smell still filled the car's interior, subtle but constant. The sound of tires on asphalt, the click of the turn signals, the soft hum of the air conditioning, everything seemed amplified. And there he was, back there, motionless. He didn't speak, didn't move, didn't touch his cell phone. He just stared out the window as if searching for someone or fearing someone might suddenly appear. I avoided eye contact in the rearview mirror. I felt like if we exchanged a glance, something would break. It was as if there was a silent pact between us. He wouldn't threaten me and I wouldn't ask questions. My mind, however, wouldn't stop. I thought of possibilities, scenarios, headlines. Driver picks up crime suspect and unknowingly becomes an accomplice. I imagined testimonies, interrogations, security cameras showing my car leaving the scene of some crime. Every second of silence was a complete episode of the worst series of my life playing in my mind. I wanted to ask his name. I wanted to ask where he came from, but I couldn't. I felt like any misplaced word could trigger him, and I didn't know what he was carrying in that dark cloth. I checked my GPS, just to have something concrete to focus on. The destination was vague, a street near the city center, but with no clear landmark. One of those shopping streets that closes at night and remains deserted. Strange. But not as strange as the man sitting behind me, surrounded by silence, blood, and a story that, little by little, seemed about to leak out through the edges of the night. I tried to help, he said, breaking the silence abruptly. His voice was firm but low, as if he'd rehearsed that sentence 1,000 times before uttering it. It took me a second to react. It was the first thing he'd said since getting in the car. I didn't look back, I kept driving, but my attention was completely on him. The guy was on the ground. Lots of blood. Nobody did anything. I just did what I thought was right. Silence again. He expected some response from me, maybe an "I understand" or an "Are you okay?" But I just let him talk. With each word, my mind tried to fill in the empty spaces in the narrative, the gaps he didn't explain. I heard the screams around the corner. When I got there, he was already unconscious. Blood was everywhere. I held him in my arms, trying to stop it, but it was too much. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. All I know is that I started screaming for help. No one came. That's when I ran. Until then, everything seemed possible. Tragic, but plausible. A good Samaritan terrified by the inertia of a big city. But something didn't add up. "And you didn't call an ambulance?" I asked, the first time I broke my own silence. He hesitated. No, there wasn't time. I panicked. I ran. I knew that if the police arrived and saw me like that, they would think it was me. That I attacked the guy. That part struck me as odd. Nobody tries to save a life and then runs away without at least dialing 911. It was instinctive, automatic. Something about it didn't make sense. But at the same time, there was a disconcerting logic to the way he spoke. He didn't seem to be making it up on the spot. He seemed to be following a memorized line, like someone reliving the scene in their mind dozens of times, trying to find justification for what they did or didn't do. And as he told me, I kept driving, more attentive to his breathing than to the traffic. Something told me there was still a lot he wasn't telling. And that soon, this story would start to fall apart. The more he spoke, the more I felt something wasn't quite right. The words came with a certain fluidity, but the emotion seemed practiced. He was so calm. There was no tremor in his voice, none of the despair typical of someone who's just seen someone die in their own arms. And that's when I started noticing the flaws. Small details, but glaring to anyone paying attention. First, he said he held the guy in his arms, that the blood was all over him, but the stains on his shirt ran from top to bottom, as if he'd been thrown. His shoulders and chest were much more covered than his forearms. It was strange, almost as if he'd been hit by something or been near a bloody explosion, and not simply helping someone on the ground. Second, he said no one showed up. But that part of town, even though it's emptier, still has cameras on lampposts and businesses. Not calling an ambulance, not waiting, not giving a statement, all of this weighed against him. I tried to ask one more question carefully. Do you know the guy? The injured one? He took a long time to respond. Long seconds. Long enough for my anxiety to rise another level. No, I've never seen it before. I just heard the scream. It was instinct, but I sensed it immediately. Not by what he said, but by what he didn't say. The silence between sentences. The way he looked away from the reflection in the rearview mirror. It wasn't someone trying to hide the trauma. It was someone trying to craft a convincing storyline but hadn't rehearsed enough. My heart started racing. I was now convinced this guy wasn't just a frightened witness. He was running but not from the police. He was running from something much fouler. And I was in the front seat, trapped with him in the same enclosed space, the city sleeping outside, and no real plan for how to get out of this if he decided to change the course of the night. That story kept echoing in my head. Each time he spoke, I felt less convinced that I was dealing with an innocent. And the longer I drove, the more that feeling of something is wrong turned into an uncomfortable, almost physical certainty. It was like a weight on my back, a tightness in my stomach, as if my body were trying to warn me before my mind had even accepted it. He was too calm, too controlled. And me? I started to wonder, what exactly had he done before getting into my car? What was inside that dark cloth he carried so carefully in his lap? Why had he specifically asked to go downtown, an area with many exits, alleys, and escape points? I checked my phone. No notifications. No emergency in the area. No reports of an attack or trouble. Whatever had happened, it hadn't reached the surface yet. But it would. And if I kept running, it might be too late to explain my role in all this. At that moment, I no longer knew if I was helping an innocent person or facilitating the escape of someone who had just taken a life. It was at one of the traffic lights that I noticed. As the car slowed, he leaned forward slightly, adjusting something on his feet. In the process, the dark cloth he was carrying slipped slightly from his lap, revealing. I couldn't see it all, but it was a thin, long piece of metal, perhaps a tube, perhaps a piece of equipment, or something much worse. I kept my eyes on the sign, but my heart raced. The object seemed heavy. It wasn't a phone, nor a bottle, and certainly not something you carry around like this, hidden in a cloth. He noticed I'd seen it and discreetly repositioned the cloth, covering everything again. No words. No attempt to explain. I pretended not to understand. But inside, my every thought was racing. What was that? A weapon? Part of one? Some instrument used in the so-called rescue? Or perhaps something that belonged to the victim? The strange thing is that he didn't seem at all nervous about me seeing it. On the contrary, he seemed to expect it. As if he knew that, by now, my mind was already too stuck in doubt to get out. In that moment, I understood that it wasn't just the blood that made me uncomfortable. It was the knowledge that he carried something. Something that had meaning. And that, with silence and time, it was becoming more threatening than any words he'd ever spoken. A few minutes later, he broke the silence again. You can drop me off at the next left, that dead-end street over there. I checked the GPS. It didn't make sense. The original destination, marked on the app, was a nearby avenue, bustling with light and people. But he wanted to get off first. It was on a dark, dead-end street lined with empty commercial buildings. One of those places the city forgets at night. Are you sure? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Yes, he replied too quickly. You can stop there near the blue iron door. I'll do the rest on foot. That phrase echoed in my head. I'll do the rest on foot. What rest? What else did he have to do in that abandoned area, carrying a hidden object and his body covered in blood? As I turned the steering wheel toward the indicated street, my stomach sank. The streetlights there were off. The reflection of their headlights revealed old graffiti, broken windows, and an atmosphere that reeked of abandonment. There were no parked cars. No sign of life. The feeling was clear: he didn't want to be seen arriving there. And most importantly, he didn't want witnesses. And it was about to end up exactly where he wanted me to. I pulled over slowly, my hands firmly on the steering wheel, trying to hide my nervousness. The street seemed frozen in time. No sound, no lights on, not even a wind. The air there was different, dense, stifling, almost complicit in that silence. He didn't move immediately. He stood there for a few seconds, motionless, as if calculating something. Then he let out a long sigh and murmured, "Thanks for that. You did the right thing." That sentence deeply bothered me. Was it gratitude or irony? Because until that moment, I still didn't know if I'd been an accomplice, a bystander, or simply stupid. He calmly opened the door, pulled the cloth away along with the hidden object he hadn't revealed until then, and left without looking back. He walked straight to the blue iron door, where he stopped, looked around, and disappeared through a small crack. The door closed slowly, creaking like in a thriller. I stood there, engine running, headlights illuminating the void. For a moment I considered following behind, seeing where he was going, what he was taking. But something stopped me. Maybe fear. Maybe common sense. In the rearview mirror, a dark car appeared in the distance, parked on the corner. No one got out. No lights came on. It just sat there, parked, as if waiting for someone. Or for me. I slowly put the car in reverse and left. No rush. Not daring to look again. I never heard from him again. No news. No complaints. No mention in newspapers, radio stations, apps. Nothing. It was as if he had vanished into that blue iron door, taking with him his blood, the object, and all the secrets he didn't want or couldn't share. Sometimes I think he might have actually been trying to help someone. That he ran away out of fear, on impulse. But on other nights, when I remember that too calm look, the calculated silence, the chosen fate, I'm sure he was part of something bigger. Something I shouldn't have witnessed, even indirectly. That ride lasted less than 20 minutes. But since then, nothing seems simple when someone gets in my car. Every passenger, every glance in the rearview mirror, every prolonged silence, everything carries a new weight. And you want to know the truth? Part of me would like to see him again. Not to confront. Not to accuse. But just to ask as calmly as possible, what exactly were you carrying that night? If you were the driver in my place, would you have continued the race? Leave it here in the comments, I really want to know. And if you enjoy this kind of true, tense, and suspenseful story, leave a like and subscribe to Backseat Secrets. There's a lot that hasn't been told yet, and maybe some should never have been.